Before their reunion, both Connie and Tom had gone through major life changes. Connie spent years focused on her career, never quite finding a deep connection in her relationships. Tom had lost his wife, Veronica, and struggled with the grief. These experiences led both to reevaluate their futures, thinking it might be too late for a new chapter. Their families had been close for years. Connie had admired Tom from afar, and after her sister's end of life, she spent more time with him. The emotional support they shared grew into a deeper bond. They hadn't expected this, but both felt the connection was unique and comforting. As they drove to Tom's house, their thoughts lingered on the changes in their relationship. Going back to how things were wasn't an option, and neither wanted to. While Connie was eager to move forward, Tom was more hesitant, though just as committed. The only question left was when they would tell others about their new relationship. "Come on in," Tom said as they pulled into his driveway. "The boys aren't home, so we can relax and talk. I'm Detective Sergeant Pavel Janacek. This is Detective Filipponi. We're here to discuss your wife's disappearance on April 23rd. Tom replied, "I thought I covered everything with the Coast Guard." "There have been a few new developments since then." "Like what?" Tom asked. "How would you describe your relationship with your wife, Mr. Lynch?" "It was great. We'd been married 18 years. No problems, at least until the accident." "And there were no marital issues?" "No," Tom said firmly. "What's going on here?" "Do you know a man named Brandon Collingsworth?" Janacek asked. "Number should I?" "He's a senior accountant at your wife's company. Are you sure you don't know him?" "I'm sure. I didn't know her work colleagues. She reported to Marcel Lapierre, not Collingsworth. This was a business-only environment." "What's this about?" Janacek leaned back, still watching Tom. "We got an anonymous tip suggesting your wife and Mr. Collingsworth were having an affair. You had no idea?" Tom was visibly shocked. "I don't believe it. What does this have to do with her disappearance?" Janacek continued. "We've interviewed people at her office. Several suspected something between Collingsworth and your wife. They normally wouldn't have interacted, but the rumors persisted." Tom accused them of relying on gossip, but Janacek pressed on. "We also interviewed Mr. Collingsworth, and after some pressure, he admitted they were involved." Tom looked stunned. "I had no idea. Why would she do this?" Janacek stayed silent, while Tom processed the information. Finally, Tom asked, "Why are the RCMP involved?" "There's a chance this could be a suspicious end of life," Filipponi said. "Maybe you found out about the affair and acted in a moment of rage." "That's ridiculous," Tom replied angrily. "I didn't know about the affair, and I'm not a butcher." "That's what many husbands say," Filipponi remarked. "Sometimes anger takes over, and bad things happen." "So, am I a suspect?" Tom asked, now defensive. "Not at this time," Janacek answered calmly. "We just want to go over the facts again for our own records, separate from the Coast Guard report." Tom Lynch sat in silence, clearly uncomfortable while the detectives watched him. "Okay, one more time," he said. "But from now on, if you want to talk, my lawyer will be here." "Got it." "That's fine," Filipponi replied. Tom began, "We were in the Southern Straits race, like we had been for the past 6 years. The weather was supposed to be rough, but nothing like what it turned into. My boats got radar, GPS, and Veronica and I had plenty of experience, so I wasn't worried. We took 4-hour shifts at the helm. I was on from midnight to 4 a.m. while Veronica slept. I had coffee and energy bars to stay awake. The storm worsened after I took over, and radar showed it was going to be rougher than expected. I put on my survival suit and left Veronica's at the bottom of the companionway in case she came on deck. Everything was fine until just before 2 a.m. I started feeling sick. Cramps, like food poisoning. It got worse, so I hit the alarm to wake Veronica. She came up, suited, and took over. I went below to the head, and it took a while because I had diarrhea. I heard a noise on deck, figured something was loose, but knew Veronica wouldn't leave the helm, so I cleaned up and got ready to go back. When I returned, she was gone. I turned on the deck light and called for her, but nothing. "How long were you gone?" Janosek asked. "Maybe 15 or 20 minutes, no more." "Continue," the detective said. The boat was on self-steering, which we usually avoid in bad weather. The noise I heard was from the inflatable. An oar had come loose. I checked below, thinking she might be in another cabin or head, but she wasn't there. It took me a few minutes to realize she'd gone overboard. I dropped the sails, started the engine, and circled back using the GPS. I called her name and turned on the deck light, but deep down, I knew it was hopeless. I made a distress call to the Coast Guard, and they have the recording. I kept searching, but the waves were too rough. The Coast Guard arrived around 4 a.m., but I knew by then she was gone. Even with her survival gear, the water was too cold. I lost her. "Her body's never been found?" Filipponi asked, already knowing the answer. Tom shook his head sadly. "Anything else that might help clear this up?" Janosek asked. "Number, I'm as confused as you are about the affair. I don't think it's connected to her disappearance." "As I said," Filipponi added, "an angry husband might seek revenge. If she was planning to leave you, maybe you knew a divorce would cost you half of everything, including your business." "How many times do I have to say it? I didn't know about the affair. It was an accident, a horrible accident." The detective sat quietly, watching Tom. Was he telling the truth? They had no proof otherwise. But if he knew about the affair, was it just a coincidence that she vanished without a trace? Coincidences were hard to believe in their line of work. "That's all for now, Mr. Lynch. Let us know if you plan to leave town. This case isn't closed," Filipponi said. Tom stood, clearly angry. "Next time I'll have my lawyer. I won't be your scapegoat while you try to make 2 and 2 equal 5. He left the room, unable to slam the door, thanks to the pneumatic closer. "What do you think?" Janosek asked his partner. "Hard to say. It all depends on whether he knew about the affair." "Yeah," Janosek nodded. "That's the key." 3 months had passed since Tom lost Veronica, and his life had been filled with turmoil. First came the grief. Then, a month ago, the revelation of her affair with a coworker named Collingsworth. Tom understood why the police were suspicious. He would have had a motive if he had known about the affair. It shifted his focus from mourning to dealing with the fallout. Veronica's parents were devastated, especially her mother, who seemed to blame Tom and had become distant. The only real support Tom received was from Veronica's younger sister, Connie. Connie, who once had a crush on Tom as a teenager, had grown into a successful, independent woman running her own interior design business. Tom's mother was also upset by Veronica's end of life, but she accepted it as a tragic accident. Having already lost Tom's father, who had been liquidated during a business trip to China, she poured her energy into supporting Tom and her grandsons, Verna and Tony. The twins were handling their mother's end of life better than Tom. Vern was focused on getting an academic scholarship, while Tony planned to join the family business. Tom hadn't told them about their mother's affair or the police questioning. After a small memorial service, a plaque was placed in a park near Veronica's parents' home. Her father appreciated the gesture, but her mother remained cold toward Tom, showing affection only for her grandsons. Connie often visited Tom on weekends, encouraging him to get back out on the water, but he hadn't touched the linchpin lady since the accident. When he suggested selling the boat, both Connie and the boys opposed the idea, so it stayed docked, unused. Tom found comfort in his work at Linchpin Plastics, which specialized in PET containers for industries like pharmaceuticals and cosmetics. His father had steered the company away from the crowded beverage market, and Tom had continued his father's strategy, keeping the business thriving. He worked closely with his old college friend Brian Edgar, who was now his sales manager. They were both in sync about the company's direction and were good friends outside of work. Although Tom hadn't returned to his sailboat, he still found refuge at the yacht club, especially in the dining room and bar. His father had once been Commodore, and Tom had been expected to follow, but Veronica's end of life had delayed that. Still, he enjoyed being at the club and often brought his sons for dinner. One Friday evening in July, after a long week at work, Tom stopped by the club. He had invited his sons, but Tony had other plans, so only Verna showed up and brought Connie with him. "Hi, Dad. Hope you don't mind that Aunt Connie joined us since Tony couldn't make it," Verna said. "Tom, can you tell your son not to call me Aunt Connie? It's making me feel old," she said. "Verna, respect your aunt's wishes," Tom replied. "So I should just call her Connie?" Verna asked. "Sure. Or Babe. Or Hot Stuff," Tom joked, prompting laughter from the group. It was the first time in months that Tom could remember laughing. "Don't you dare, Verna," Connie said with a playful poke. "You may call me Connie or Miss Fairley, depending on the occasion." Vern shrugged and grinned at his father, and they all shared a light moment, something that had been rare in the past 3 months. Friday night at the dining room was seafood night, and each of them ordered a different dish. The food was excellent, as usual. The mood stayed light until the dessert tray came around. Connie and Tom passed, but Vern chose a huge New York cheesecake. Their waiter quickly brought 3 forks, anticipating they'd share. "I need to stop eating here," Tom joked, leaning back. "I'm going to hit 300 pounds soon." "Nonsense," Connie replied. "You still look great, just like when you dated my sister." "Ooh, someone's got the hots for Dad," Vern teased. "Careful," Tom warned. "This is family, not one of your teenage chats." "Relax, Tom," Connie said. "Vern didn't mean any damage, right, Vern?" "Yeah, sorry, Dad," Vern said, looking concerned. "I'm not upset," Tom said quietly, glancing at Connie. "But some topics aren't for public or private talk." "Party pooper," Connie grinned. "Don't lead my son astray. I'm trying to raise him to be a gentleman," Tom said with a smile. "Good luck with that," Connie laughed, and Verna joined in. As coffee was served, Verna asked, "Dad, can you give Connie a ride home? I've got a date in half an hour." "Sure," Tom replied. "Have a good time." After Verna left, Connie turned to Tom. "You've raised 2 great boys, Tom. You must be proud." "I am, but Veronica deserves a lot of the credit. She guided them. They'll be out of the house soon." "What will you do then?" Connie asked. "I don't know. Maybe downsize or live on the lady. You haven't been on the boat since the accident, right? Number, I just can't get excited about it. The boys would love to go out with you, and so would I. I love that boat as much as you do." "I don't want to go alone, Connie. I'm not ready." "You don't have to. I can crew with you. I know the boat well. Maybe I should take her out. She's been sitting there for months." "There's the Tom I know," Connie smiled. "Why not check her out tonight? If all's good, we could make a weekend of it." Tom hesitated, wondering how the conversation had moved so fast. "Can I trust you to behave?" he grinned. "Of course," she smiled. "Vern was right. I've had a thing for you since I was 14. I knew that, but I never took advantage. And after that, I was married. I took those vows seriously." "I can tell," Connie said quietly, looking at her cup. Tom broke the silence. "Let's go check the boat." "Yes, let's." They walked to the dock, and Tom opened the gate for Connie. As she passed, she brushed against him, not by accident. Tom watched her head toward the linchpin lady. Connie had never married, saying she hadn't found the right man. Veronica used to tease that she wasn't looking hard enough. Connie had built a successful interior design business, starting on her own at 27, and by 33 she was well established and doing well. Veronica had been slim, tall, and always put together, but not overly glamorous. She was an accountant, but had stayed home when the twins were born. Once they turned 13, she went back to her old job at Samples and Reed and seemed content. She didn't socialize much at work, which suited her introverted nature. Tom always made sure to introduce new people carefully before they became friends. Connie was the opposite of her sister Veronica in many ways, shorter but curvier, with a lively personality. Tom had often found her very attractive, occasionally wishing Veronica had her spark. Despite these thoughts, he was content in his marriage. Now at 40, he felt he was too young to give up on life, and, if he sought a new partner, he would be selective. Tom was a handsome man, 6 feet tall, with dark brown hair, a medium build, and a tan from years of sailing. He worked out regularly, and his natural smile and dark brown eyes made him stand out. Many women envied Veronica for having such a successful, personable husband. Tom quickly checked over the lady and found everything in order. The maintenance team had emptied the freshwater tanks, and the fuel was nearly full. The batteries and systems all worked, and he left instructions to refill the water. The next morning, he'd just need to pick up food and drinks. That night, as Tom lay in bed, he thought about Connie. It felt odd to think about dating his late wife's sister, even though it wasn't wrong. She had certainly grown up since her awkward teenage years. Still, the idea didn't bother him. Connie had often joined the family on weekend sailing trips, and the thought of taking her out on the lady felt natural. He left a note for Vernie and Tony, inviting them to join him on the boat for the weekend, then packed a bag. Despite his earlier reluctance, he was looking forward to being back on the water. Tom was startled awake the next morning by the doorbell at 7 a.m. Dragging himself out of bed, he pulled on jeans and opened the door to find Connie, ready for sailing and beaming. "What are you doing here this early?" he groaned. "The sun's up. Let's go," she chirped. "Come in. I need to get ready. Make some coffee." "Sure. And don't forget your overnight bag." "I've got it packed," Tom replied. 15 minutes later, Tom was showered, dressed, and carrying his bag. The boys hadn't stirred, likely due to a late night. Connie held up Tom's note to the boys, smirking. "Looks like it's just you and me for the weekend." Tom smiled faintly. "We need groceries." "Nope. I took care of it last night," Connie said proudly. "Good. When's high tide?" "Just about now," she replied, ensuring they'd have an easy exit from the marina. Connie drove them to the yacht club, chatting along the way while Tom sipped his coffee. They loaded the supplies and bags onto the boat in the cool morning sun. Connie expertly untied the lines as Tom carefully navigated out of the marina with the bow thruster. The diesel engine hummed as they headed toward the open waters of Georgia Strait. There wasn't much wind, but they had no set destination. Tom kept the motor running, scanning for a breeze. "Where do you want to go?" Tom asked, as they stood together in the cockpit. "Somewhere sunny, warm, and private," Connie replied, giving him a satisfied look. Tom grinned, fully aware of Connie's intentions. He had known about her attraction to him for years. When she was 14 and he was 21, it had been awkward. Later, as she grew into an attractive woman, he sometimes avoided being alone with her. But Veronica had laughed it off. Now, with both of them single, things felt different. After Veronica's end of life, Connie began checking in on him, taking care of the boys, and handling household tasks, all while managing her own business. Tom didn't mind. Connie's positive energy was a welcome relief after everything that had happened. He often saved his memories for private moments, especially at night. Sleeping alone felt strange, especially after Veronica's scent had faded from the sheets. The two of them had rarely been apart, traveling together to trade shows in places like Chicago and Dusseldorf. His thoughts drifted back to the detectives. It was still hard to accept that Veronica had been unfaithful, but the evidence was clear. Others knew and talked. He had no choice but to accept it as fact. "A penny for your thoughts?" Connie asked, breaking his reverie. "Just reminiscing," Tom lied. "Tom, you need to stop grieving. Your sons and even my parents have accepted it. You have many years ahead that could be happy if you let them," she said gently. He nodded. "I suppose you're right. Is that what this weekend is about?" "Exactly. You're still young, and what happened wasn't your fault. It's time to move forward, and you know I'm here to help." Tom smiled. "You've been a great support, Connie. I don't know if I've said it, but having you around has been a big help." She smiled back and gave him a hug. "Where are we headed?" she asked. "I thought Saturna. Maybe anchor at Winter Cove." "Perfect," she said enthusiastically. "Great. Take the helm, and I'll get some coffee in Danish." As Tom made his way below deck, he noticed the wind was finally picking up. They could sail once they finished their snack. His father had bought the linchpin lady from a business associate who was desperate during a divorce, then refurbished it to modern standards. The boat had been the site of many family weekends, and it had proven its worth during the storm when Veronica was lost. Tom couldn't help but wonder if he could have done something differently to save her, but then there was the affair. The confusion and regret weighed on him. He returned to the cockpit with coffee and Danish, and they ate in comfortable silence, enjoying the view as they sailed west into Georgia Strait. They'd turned south toward the Gulf Islands later. The waters were calm, though they kept an eye on ferry traffic. After their snack, they raised the sails. Tom and Connie were a well-practiced team. The winches made raising the Genoa and mainsail easy. The Lady wasn't built for speed, but was a comfortable cruiser, perfect for them. The wind was still light, but they made good progress under sail, gliding over the gentle chop. Sunglasses and sunscreen were necessary as they sailed under the bright sun. Connie handled the helm with confidence, as she had done many times before. She had often joined the family on sailing trips, and Tom had always appreciated her help, both on deck and in the galley. By late afternoon, they arrived at Winter Cove on Saturna Island. Their favorite anchoring spot was free. Tom carefully guided the Lady into position, while Connie handled the anchor, following his directions. The cove was sheltered from the wind, and they settled in comfortably for the evening. When Tom was satisfied with the anchor, he signaled Connie to cut the engine. The sudden quiet was always striking. No traffic or planes, and the jet skis were gone for the evening, leaving them in peaceful solitude. "What's for dinner, Connie?" Tom asked. "Pork and beans on a paper plate," she joked with a straight face. "You liar," Tom laughed. "What did you really bring?" "A variety of cold cuts, cheese, coleslaw, fresh rolls, and lemon tarts." "Sounds healthy," Tom grumbled. "What about wine?" "Do you still have that Spanish red, Castillo something?" "Yup. Want to start with a Beaujolais I opened?" "Sure. I'll handle dinner while you set up the table," Connie offered. They set up at the back of the cockpit, enjoying the last of the sunlight. Tom grabbed the Beaujolais from the cooler and opened the Spanish red to breathe. They clinked glasses in silent toast. The food exceeded Connie's modest description, and there was plenty left for the next day. "I'm glad you decided to do this, Tom," Connie said. "Go sailing?" "Yes, and invite me along." "Wasn't it your idea?" Tom teased. "Would you have gone without me?" she asked. After a pause, Tom admitted, "No, probably not." "Any regrets?" she asked. He smiled. "None." They ate quietly, enjoying their wine and the peaceful surroundings. After a while, Connie spoke again. "Tom, do you know the 5 stages of grief?" Tom looked at her surprised. "Yeah, vaguely. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right?" "Exactly. Where do you think you are?" "I haven't thought about it much. There's no denying Veronica's gone, and I was angry, blaming myself. Depression hit hard, but I think I'm working through it. The pain is still there, though." "So, are you nearing acceptance?" she asked. "It's more complicated than that. There are things I've found out that change everything," Tom replied, his voice heavy with meaning. Connie's expression shifted from confusion to realization. "She cheated on you, didn't she?" she asked angrily. Tom was taken aback by how quickly she guessed. He nodded, but didn't say anything. "That selfish, stupid woman," Connie fumed. "How did you find out? I don't want this getting out to the family. It would hurt too many people. She's gone, so what's the point?" "I agree. It would devastate my parents and your boys." Tom hesitated, then explained. "The RCMP called me in for an interview about the accident. At first it seemed routine, but then they asked about a senior manager at Veronica's office. I didn't know him, but they hinted at an affair. Eventually, the guy admitted to it. It had been going on for months." Connie was stunned. "How could she do this to you?" Tom shook his head. "I had no idea. The police even wondered if I knew about it and did something to her." Connie sat silently, processing the information. After a long pause, she asked, "Is that why it's been so hard for you to move on?" Tom nodded. "Yes. Not only did I lose her, but I also can't understand why she betrayed me, the boys, all of us." Connie sighed. My sister was always selfish. We never got along growing up. Maybe she resented me for being the younger, unexpected child who got a lot of attention. But when you came along, I could see her scheming. You were a catch, handsome, smart, and set to inherit your dad's business. She knew exactly what she was doing. Tom listened quietly as Connie spoke, a hint of dark humor in her voice as she reflected on their shared history with Veronica. Tom chuckled, knowing Connie wasn't revealing anything new about her feelings for him. I was helpless, Connie said. Too young and awkward back then, but you always treated me well. You were my Prince Charming, even though I knew I'd lose you to my sister. I cried myself to sleep, wishing I was older and prettier. Once I got older, she stopped giving me a hard time because she had you and the life she wanted. You were never ugly, Tom protested. You were just growing up. By the time you turned 16, you were beautiful, and you've only gotten more beautiful since. I'm surprised no one swept you off your feet. Connie gave him a serious look. You don't get it. I was waiting for you. Every guy I dated was compared to you, and none of them measured up. Tom, surprised, leaned back and sighed. You waited 20 years for your sister to mess up? She nodded. Futile, I know. Veronica had you and everything she wanted. You gave her everything. New cars, vacations, a big house, and she took you for granted. I never knew, Tom admitted. I thought I was just giving her what she deserved for being a good wife and mother. There were no signs she was unhappy or cheating. She was selfish, Connie said. When she had everything, she still wanted more, like a lover. I knew she'd mess up someday. You really didn't think much of her, did you? Tom said sadly. Part of it was jealousy, because she had you. But mostly it's anger now, knowing how she betrayed you. And now she's gone, Tom said. Connie nodded. Yes, and I'm still here, not knowing what to do. Tom sighed. It's too soon for me to think about the future. I am attracted to you, but everything I believed about my marriage is falling apart, and it's messing with me. I might need therapy to sort this out. Therapy? Really? Connie asked, surprised. Maybe. I need to get my life back together for the boys, the business, and myself. Connie hugged him tightly. I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't mean to dump all this on you now. I had no idea what my sister had done. I'll give you space. I've waited this long. I can wait longer. Tom held her close, unsure of his feelings. Was it love or just confusion? He needed to figure it out before making any decisions. They finished the wine in silence, sitting apart, but not distant. The stars appeared, and Tom found himself thinking about the satellites orbiting above, always watching from a distance. The quiet of the cove was interrupted only by the occasional jet from Vancouver. As the night settled in, they buttoned up the cockpit and went below. Tom slept in the forward stateroom, and Connie chose one of the aft guest rooms. The boat could sleep 7, though it had rarely been full in recent years, usually just Tom, Veronica, the boys, and sometimes Connie. Tom woke early on Sunday as the cabin filled with light. Knowing he wouldn't fall back asleep, he grabbed some clean clothes and headed to the forward head for a quick shower and shave. When he emerged, Connie was already in the galley, wearing a sheer dressing gown and making coffee. Morning, he greeted her with a smile. Hey, did you sleep well? Yeah. You? Okay, but we did talk about some heavy stuff last night, she admitted. I didn't mean to burden you with that. No, I'm glad you told me. It's something I needed to know. Tom noticed her translucent gown showing her figure clearly and felt a familiar attraction. While he had seen her in bikinis before, things felt different now. With Veronica gone, he found his inhibitions slipping. He poured himself a bowl of cereal, knowing Connie wouldn't want a big breakfast. She soon disappeared into the shower while Tom ate, contemplating how much things had changed in his life. Grief had been replaced with a sense of freedom, especially after learning about Veronica's affair. For the first time, he realized he was free to pursue other women, like Connie. When Connie returned, dressed in snug shorts and a tank top, Tom jokingly asked, "Are you going to be warm enough in that?" I'll layer up if I need to, she teased. Besides, it's easy to take off layers. As they prepared to pull anchor, Tom reflected on how his attitude had shifted in the past month. Veronica's betrayal had broken his emotional ties, but he was still figuring out how long he should wait before moving on. Was he worrying about what Connie's parents, his mother, or even the RCMP might think? Or was it time to focus on his own happiness? They motored out of the cove, heading through Active Pass and into Georgia Strait, enjoying the calm morning. It was peaceful, with few boats out yet. Tom and Connie decided to raise sail despite the light wind, hoping it would pick up later. "Can you take the day off tomorrow?" Tom asked. "I could, especially since I've got my phone with me. I'm thinking of playing hooky." "Good idea. I'll let the office know I won't be in either. We can find a place to stay and get a good meal." "Nanaimo?" Connie suggested. "Perfect. There's a great pub by the harbor." "I won't need to dress up for that," she smiled. "You look good in anything," Tom replied. "Why, thank you. So what are you saying, Mr. Lynch?" "That you're gorgeous, and any guy would dream of being with you." "Are you saying you're not interested, or maybe you're not red-blooded?" she teased. "You know better than that," he laughed. "So, what don't you find appealing about me?" she asked playfully. "Connie, how did I end up in this conversation?" Tom scowled, still smiling. "Well, Tom," she said, her tone becoming serious, "I've been patient, but now I'm going to be persistent. You have no excuse to resist me." Tom studied Connie carefully, sensing her mix of seriousness and playfulness. It seemed mostly serious, with a hint of fun. She had laid her cards on the table, and now he had to decide whether to pick them up, knowing it would change everything. "Aren't we rushing things?" he asked after a long pause. "No," Connie said firmly. "We don't have to broadcast our relationship. I've waited 20 years, Tom. I'm 33, and my clock's ticking. I want you, and I want a child with you. Can I make it any clearer?" Tom was stunned by her directness. He had never heard her be so open about what she wanted, especially declaring her desire for a child with him. He wasn't sure how to respond. "You've made it clear," he said. "What do you expect me to say?" "You're supposed to tell me you've had feelings for me for 15 years and can't wait to get me into bed," she joked, her humor returning. "Oh, is that all?" Tom replied. "One step at a time," she grinned. Tom turned away, staring at the horizon as he processed her boldness. Finally, he looked back at her. "How exactly does one go about screwing someone's brains out?" he asked, breaking the tension. Connie burst into laughter, releasing the tension of the moment. She walked over, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him deeply. "If you let me, I'll show you," she whispered. "I'll look forward to it," Tom said, pulling her into another kiss. "You mean it?" she asked, still unsure. "Are you taking back your offer?" he teased. "Never. You're mine, Tom Lynch, and I won't let you go." Tom believed her completely. "What are you thinking now?" she asked. "I'm wondering how you're so sure. I don't want to disappoint you." "Veronica used to brag about you after a drink or two," Connie said with a sly smile. Tom's mood shifted, and Connie noticed immediately. "Are you embarrassed by what she might have said?" "Yeah." "I didn't think she'd share those things," Tom admitted. "She was more likely to tell me than anyone else," Connie reassured him. "But let's not dwell on that. She's gone, and I'm here. I want to help you forget the bad and focus on the good. That's all I can hope for, I guess. And I'll show you how good life can be," she smiled. Tom laughed, kissing her again. He knew it would take time to heal and move forward, but Connie was committed to helping him through it. They spent the rest of the afternoon sailing into Nanaimo Harbor. By the time they arrived, Tom had mentally surrendered to the idea of moving forward with Connie. They talked about lighthearted topics, but Tom knew there was still much to learn about the woman who was so determined to be part of his future. Connie had pushed him to make a decision, jump or walk away, and he had chosen to jump. She was excited but remained patient, knowing they had too much in common for it to fail. Later, as they walked hand in hand from the pub, Tom couldn't shake his lingering doubts. He had made a commitment to Connie, but he wasn't sure what kind of commitment it was. Perhaps it was just about Zex, though he knew Connie saw it as something much deeper. "You're awfully quiet," Connie said as they reached the dock. "Second thoughts?" "Maybe," Tom admitted. "I feel guilty, like I'm cheating on Veronica. I know it's crazy, but it's there, nagging at me." Connie stopped and looked at him with genuine sadness. "I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. I know what I want, but not at any cost. I'll give you time to decide when, or if, you're ready." Tom smiled. "Thanks. You're special, and I do love you. I'm just not sure what kind of love that is yet." Connie smiled back, resigned to be patient once again. She knew when the time came, she wanted it to be for good. They boarded the boat and went below to the lounge, where Tom poured them each a brandy and turned on the TV. They sat in silence, watching a PBS special featuring a rock star, using it as a distraction until bedtime. Tom kissed Connie goodnight and headed to the forward stateroom. Connie sat for a while, thinking about how close she had come to getting Tom to commit, but he hadn't yet. She knew better than to push further that night. It could ruin everything. However, she wondered how much longer she could wait. If Tom wasn't going to be part of her life, she needed to move on. Meanwhile, Tom lay awake in his bunk, replaying their conversation. Had he hesitated out of fear? He was torn between his desire for Connie and the uncertainty of what it meant. Veronica's infidelity still haunted him, and while he tried to view her as unfaithful, it didn't bring him closure. The image of their once perfect marriage felt shattered. After hours of lying awake, Tom got up. He noticed the lights were out, and Connie's door was closed. Grabbing a beer, he plugged his headphones into the stereo, letting soft rock soothe him. He eventually dozed off, but his dreams were vivid. Connie crying, Veronica's scent lingering, and a soft kiss that startled him awake. When he opened his eyes, Connie was kneeling before him, smiling. It had been her kiss, her scent. He rubbed his eyes and took off his headphones. "I must have fallen asleep," he muttered. Connie grinned, holding up the half-empty beer bottle. "Drank yourself to sleep?" "What time is it?" he asked. "About 2. "Couldn't sleep either." Tom shook his head. "Number you?" "Same. You were dreaming pretty intensely," she said. "Talking in your sleep." "Veronica never mentioned that," Tom replied. Connie leaned closer. "You were crying in my dream," Tom blurted out. "I wasn't crying," Connie reassured him. "Must have been in the dream." Tom hesitated, then admitted, "I didn't want to hurt you in the dream." Connie, still kneeling with her arms on his thighs, looked up at him. "You care for me, don't you?" she asked softly. "You know I do. I'm just trying to figure out if it's more than that." After a long pause, Tom looked into her eyes. "Connie, will you stay with me tonight?" She nodded, helping him up and leading him to his stateroom, knowing this was the moment she had been waiting for. The next morning, Tom woke with Connie's body pressed against him. He glanced at the clock. It was past 8. His mind wandered back to the previous night and the dream. What did it all mean? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. He had made love to Connie, and it felt right. Connie stirred and smiled. "You're awake," Tom nodded. "I was thinking about last night. I wanted it to be perfect for you." "It was?" she said with a contented yawn. "I've never felt so good." Tom smiled. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I can't do that." Connie grinned. "Did you really think I'd be okay with just one night?" Tom sighed. "I don't know. My head's a mess." She wrapped her arm around him, pulling him closer. "I'll make it better, Tom. I promise." He held her tightly. "I believe you, Connie. I really do." Connie stood behind Tom, her arms around his waist as he steered the lady toward Howe Sound. The wind had shifted west, speeding up their journey. It was a quiet Monday morning, with little traffic on the water. Most people didn't have the luxury of skipping work that day. As Connie thought about the past night and morning, she marveled at how their relationship had changed. What had started as a surprise had become real love, far beyond what she expected. Making love with Tom had been perfect, confirming that he was everything she had dreamed of for years. Now, being with him felt like a dream come true. They reached Fisherman's Cove at half tide, making docking easier. Connie quickly tied off the boat, and they silently loaded their gear onto a cart and headed to the parking lot. The drive back to Tom's house was quiet, both lost in thoughts about how much had changed. Their relationship was different now, and there was no going back. Though it was a big step, neither wanted to return to the way things were. When they arrived at Tom's house, he invited her in, knowing the boys wouldn't be home. Inside, Mrs. Calderon, the housekeeper, greeted them, surprised by their early return. Tom and Connie made their way to the deck with glasses of wine, where they could talk privately. After some hesitation, Tom finally asked, "So, what's next? Is it too soon to tell the boys or our parents?" Connie thought for a moment. "Probably. I don't feel the need to rush into telling anyone yet. We're still getting used to this ourselves. There's so much we don't know about each other." Tom smiled. "What happened to full speed ahead?" She laughed softly. "I'm not having second thoughts. I've waited too long for this. I just don't want to hurt anyone, especially our parents. They might think we're moving too fast." "What about the boys?" Tom asked. "I think they might already suspect something. I feel comfortable around them, and I think they're comfortable with me." Tom looked thoughtful. After a pause, Connie reached for his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze, but they remained quiet. Meanwhile, Mrs. Calderon watched them from the kitchen window, smiling. By the end of the afternoon, they agreed to keep their relationship private for a while longer. Though Tom doubted they could keep it secret for 3 months, they were willing to try. For a while, things went smoothly. August was hot and dry, and Tom and Connie spent every weekend sailing on the Lady. The boys, uninterested, always found reasons not to join, which gave Tom and Connie the privacy they enjoyed. When the boys returned to school, little changed for Tom. He was glad they'd be home most nights. The chaos after Veronica's end of life had overshadowed the months from April to June. During the summer, Vern balanced studying for his scholarship exams and spending time with his girlfriend, while Tony worked at Linchpin Plastics in quality assurance. Tom was busy with his own work, but thought of Connie every day, eagerly waiting for their weekends together. He grew more certain of his love for her. Thoughts of Veronica faded, and his dreams of her had stopped. Connie had replaced those memories, and he realized he rarely thought about Veronica anymore. But on September 1st, Tom received a call from the family lawyer, Malachi Wise. "Hello, Tom. It's been a while. How are you?" Malachi asked. "I'm fine. What's up?" Tom responded. "I wanted to ask why you haven't come in to discuss Veronica's will. I probably should have called sooner, but there didn't seem to be any rush." "Her will?" "I hadn't thought about it. She hasn't been declared officially dead yet, just missing and presumed drowned." "True, but we can still review the will, just not act on it yet. Let's set up a time to go over it and tie up a few other loose ends from her estate." "Okay, Friday before noon works," Tom agreed. On Friday, Tom arrived at Malachi's office, and they headed to lunch. Over the meal, they caught up. Tom shared how he had been spending time with Connie, and how she had helped him move forward after Veronica's end of life. Malachi asked about the boys, and Tom reassured him that they were doing well in school. As they finished eating, Malachi turned to the main reason for their meeting. "Tom, did you know Veronica added something to her will just 2 weeks before she disappeared?" Malachi asked. "No, I didn't. What kind of addition?" "She left a sealed letter for you. The contents of the will didn't change, but she included this letter. Since you already have a copy of the will, you can read the letter now if you like." Tom was puzzled. "And this was just before the accident?" "Yes, on March 29th, a little under 3 weeks before she disappeared." "I have no idea what it could be about." "Let's go back to your office and I'll read it there," Tom suggested. Malachi agreed, and they wrapped up lunch to head back. They walked back to Malachi's office in silence. Once inside, Malachi asked his secretary not to interrupt and closed the door behind them. He sat at his large cherry desk, inherited from his father, looking every bit the seasoned lawyer. He pulled out a folder, laying it on the desk, and opened it. Inside were the original will, a cream-colored envelope, and some other papers. Nothing has changed in the will since you and Veronica filed it. You probably have a copy at home or in a safe deposit box, Malachi asked. Yes, both copies are there. Good. The only thing left is this envelope. I don't know what's inside, so if you want to read it in private, I'll step out. Thanks, Tom replied, as Malachi left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Tom stared at the envelope, his name written on the front, in Veronica's familiar handwriting. He hesitated, dreading what it might contain, but curiosity won. He used Malachi's letter opener to slice it open and found several pages of Veronica's neat handwriting. His stomach tightened as he began to read.
My dearest Tom, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused, but I need to explain why. Earlier this year, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. My doctor was honest. My chances of survival were only 1 in 5. I made a selfish decision not to undergo treatment. I didn't want to suffer through chemotherapy, radiation, or the pity of others. I chose to let the cancer take its course and end things on my own terms. I've kept this secret from you and everyone else. I didn't want anyone to suspect. I've acted selfishly in other ways too. Not long before my diagnosis, I began an affair. It doesn't matter with whom, and no, you don't know him. I did it because I wanted the thrill of something forbidden. It was selfish, and I regret it. I thought I could end it quickly, but it dragged on. Comparing him to you, he failed in every way. It wasn't worth it, but I did it for me. I've tried to write this letter for weeks. I know I don't have much time left. You may have already noticed changes in me, but I can't let things go on this way. I love you, Tom, even if I didn't always show it. Please don't share this letter with our boys or my parents. When the autopsy is done, they'll learn about my illness. You will move on, Tom, and there is someone who loves you more than I ever could, Constance. She has loved you from the start and will never hurt you the way I have. With her, you will find true happiness. Take care of yourself and our sons, my love. Goodbye. Veronica. Liquidated.
Tom put the letter down, tears streaming down his face. It answered all his questions. He could almost picture Veronica stepping off the lady, ending her suffering. He didn't know how long he sat there, overwhelmed by her confession. A soft knock at the door finally broke his trance. Come in, Tom said, wiping his eyes as Malachi entered, his expression full of concern. Are you okay? Malachi asked gently. I don't know, Tom replied, sinking into his chair. The letter, it's a confession. Veronica had terminal cancer and planned to end her life. She never told anyone. But there's more. More? Malachi asked, leaning in. Tom handed him the letter. Malachi read it in silence, his eyes widening as he processed the revelations. After finishing, he shook his head in disbelief. I never would have imagined... Malachi trailed off. Tom, I should also tell you something. 2 months after Veronica disappeared, the RCMP called me in. That's when I learned about her affair. They asked if I knew the man she was involved with. When I said no, they told me he'd admitted to the affair and hinted that I might have had a motive for damaging her. Tom was shocked. And I denied knowing anything, of course. They let me go, and I haven't heard from them since. You should have called me, Tom. That put you in a dangerous situation, Malachi said. I know, but I didn't think they'd accuse me of anything. I wouldn't be so sure. The police sometimes take their time building a case. You need to act now. What should I do? Tom asked, now fully focused. I suggest we go to the RCMP and present this letter. It shows Veronica intended to take her own life. which would weaken any motive they think you had. Okay, Tom agreed. I haven't heard from them in months, but I'll follow your lead. Malachi set up a meeting with the officers, Janicek and Filipponi, at the RCMP headquarters. They presented the letter, along with a sample of Veronica's handwriting. After reviewing it, the officers seemed convinced that Veronica had planned her own end of life due to her illness. An hour later, they left, confident the case would soon be closed. Malachi promised to petition for an end-of-life certificate. There wasn't much to distribute from Veronica's will. Mostly her jewelry, clothes, and car. Tom decided Verna would inherit the car to commute to SFU, and the jewelry would be kept for his son's future wives, except for a diamond pendant Veronica had left to Connie, a piece Connie had always admired. In an odd way, the letter gave Tom closure. He understood why Veronica had chosen to leave, even though he wished she had given him the chance to say goodbye. As for her affair, it would remain a secret between Tom, the police, Malachi, and Connie. He didn't want her memory tarnished by it. When Tom got home, he called Connie. "Can I come over? I have something to show you." "Of course, Tom. When will you be here?" she asked. "I'll be there in about half an hour," he said. "I'll let Mrs. Calderon know I'm out for the evening." "I'll have something ready for us," Connie replied, her voice warm. True to his word, Tom parked his Audi at Connie's townhouse half an hour later. As he approached the front door, it opened before he could knock, revealing a smiling Connie. "Hi, lover," she greeted him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him deeply. "Hi," he replied when she let him go. They sat together on the sofa, exchanging a few more kisses before Tom placed a cream-colored envelope on the coffee table. "What's that?" Connie asked, curious. "I met with Malachi Wise today. Veronica left this letter with her will, to be opened after her end of life. She gave it to him just before she disappeared. You should read it." Connie nodded, sensing the seriousness in Tom's voice. He handed her the letter and poured 2 glasses of wine while she read. When he returned, he saw tears running down her face. She finished reading, set the letter down, and hugged Tom tightly. "I had no idea," she whispered. "She hid everything so well." "I know. She fooled all of us. It explains what happened that night on the Lady." Connie wiped her tears. "My poor sister. Hiding her illness. She really was a great actress. And now, I need to be careful. Cancer runs in families." "I hadn't thought about that," Tom admitted. "Tom, we can never tell my parents, the self-destruction or the affair. It would destroy them." "I agree," Tom said. "I won't tell the boys or my mom either. They don't need to know. I'll put the letter in the safe deposit box, but if you'd rather I destroy it, I can." "I don't know," Connie said, her voice shaking. "Let's just put it away for now and decide later." "Okay, I'll store it tomorrow," Tom assured her. Dinner that night was quiet. Later, they sat together on the sofa, half watching TV, but too distracted to focus. Eventually, Connie took Tom's hand and led him to the bedroom. They made love with tenderness, as Tom knew Connie needed comfort, not passion. He stayed with her that night, understanding she needed his warmth and presence. The letter had changed Connie's feelings toward her sister. She could almost understand why Veronica had acted the way she did, but the affair, which started before the diagnosis, still confused her. What surprised her most was Veronica's acceptance of Connie's love for Tom, almost as if she didn't know her sister at all. Later, as they lay in bed, Tom spoke softly. "Connie, I think it's time we tell the boys and our parents about us. I love you and want to marry you. Everyone should know." Connie smiled, touched. "I want that too." "Tomorrow will be a new day for us," Tom said,